Welcome to Conversations with Friends. And I'm Meredith. And I am very delighted to introduce you to someone whom I've known for quite a few years. He's an accomplished journalist, and when I give you some of his background, I could go on all day really with what Michael Skoler has done in the media over the years. But just to give you a taste of what he's done, he's been an NPR correspondent, producer for CBS Radio Network, reporter at WGBH TV in Boston. He's also headed many organizations and many public television radio organizations over the years and kind of organized things in a new and different way. He's definitely an innovator. I've seen that. And traveled around the world as a journalist. He's just been all over, and I know that one of the things that I just wanted to share about him is that a lot of his work was actually took place in Africa during the Rwanda genocide, and he's a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University, and the list goes on and on. But I think you get the idea about what Michael Skoler has been up to. Well, tonight we're actually going to share what he's up to now. And things have changed, Michael. I'm so delighted, that you're here with me because we do go back a few years. And I don't want to say you made a career change because your career is your career, but you kind of shifted in terms of the work. So tell me a little bit about how you came to be involved with the Weavers, the Aspen project called the Weavers, right? Or the Weavers Project.
It's Weave, the Social Fabric
Weave.
Project.
Oh, sorry.
And our goal is to really tackle the problem of broken social trust in this country, because we feel that our inability to trust each other, to trust institutions, is the thing that's the root cause behind a lot of the loneliness and the social and political gridlock that is occurring in the U.S. today. Some of that gridlock we see in racial equity and trying to deal with climate change issues, in trying to handle economic issues and class differences. And so behind all of that, there's a broken social trust that, if fixed, will enable us actually to tackle our broader problems.
Is it also like a feeling today of just hopelessness? I mean, like every day you find out about some horror that's happening. It did definitely a few years ago. It wasn't the speed. And, some people might say, well, it's just, because we get news faster, but it feels, can we say that there has been something that has changed and we're getting so bombarded with so many bad things today that has maybe affected our trust?
There are a lot of research stats that suggest that we're getting lonelier and lonelier, more and more isolated. A simple example, the number of people who say nobody knows them well is like 48%. And suicide rates have jumped by a third, mainly among the young in the last 20 years. We all know what opioid addiction has done in this country. But we also see the political gridlock that we're facing, and we see our inability to address kind of racial justice issues. Just on almost every level, the U.S. is certainly having a trust problem. And you look at the broader world and the rise of a new type of populist leader that often doesn't respect the rights of all. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've stopped seeing each other.
And so your project or the work that you're doing is really about seeing each other in a different way. And from what I've read, and I actually saw some videos a while back, it's about coming together and connecting in a new and different way, isn't it? To kind of reverse this whole process that's happened.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
It's really about how do we show up? How do we show up fully as ourselves? And how do we see other people fully as themselves? And how do we begin to kind of build communities where people are connected, where we have deep relationships, where we begin to trust that the people around us are actually there to support us and not to undermine us. We live in a society that's more about transactions than about relationships. And so the Weave project at the Aspen Institute is about trying to actually shift our culture, shift our social norms, to emphasize the importance of showing up for each other, finding the dignity in all people as souls, and
Mm.
and really trying to shift a culture that's all about self-achievement and striving to a culture that's really about relationships and community success.
Mm. So what I'm getting from all of this is, like you say, show up, be there for people. I had recently asked somebody, what he believed in, somebody in a work situation. Not, I wasn't working with him, but involved with something. And I just said, what do you believe in? What do you believe in? And he really couldn't answer. And then he just said to me, I believe in, I said, what's important to you? And he said, what's important to me is helping others. And I was so touched by that, because that's not where our conversation had been. And I had a feeling about him that he would, that he was like that. But do you think, in a sense, that's in many of us, or most, I would say most of us, most people do have that, but it's kind of been hidden over the years because of, a lot of materialism and competitiveness and all that's not good stuff.
Yeah, that phrases it
Mm.
perfectly, Meredith. It's, I think, all of us, um, and it depends on how you view it, whether we're genetically wired this way or, created as humans this way, but we need each other and we're interdependent. And as part of that, we want to actually be there for other people. That's what gives us pleasure, joy, and meaning in life, not the toys that we buy or the fancy houses we live in. And I think we have forgotten that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've created a culture through the way we've implemented capitalism and other systems that really denies that any of that other stuff matters and says all that matters is your power, your money, your status, your talents. And we have a meritocracy, which says, if you're good by a certain set of standards, then you rise, and if not, you fall. And one of the inherent problems of the meritocracy is that somebody's got to decide what's valuable and meritorious. And inevitably, and in this country, it's often been white males who've done that for
Mm.
many, many years. And
Mm.
and it leaves out a lot of people, and it doesn't recognize kind of the value, the beauty, the strength, the multi-talents in our diversity.
Mm.
So that's the problem we're trying to tackle, this broken social trust, this inability for people to see each other. And in many ways, you asked how I kind of got into this. I left journalism about 6 years ago because I felt like journalism, the media were not able to change. I spent a lot of my career trying to change the culture of journalism, to reframe media as not being producers of content, but being connectors of the community and using storytelling, news coverage, music, and art to create community connection. And I went through a number of organizations trying to instill that changing culture in the mindset of public radio and television. And people were resistant. And I finally decided this wasn't going to work. And so when I found the Weave project at the Aspen Institute, it felt like this is what I'd been trying to do all my life as a reporter, which was
Mm.
use information and storytelling to help people find their common humanity and to care about each other. And now that's all I work on. And I don't really work on it. What our project does is we find people in communities everywhere who are already doing this. We call it weaving community. And there are some very specific things we mean by that. But our job is to find the weavers, to give them a language to understand that they're actually doing something that's kind of against the current culture, that's countercultural. And then we ask them, how can we amplify your work? How can we support you? And we do that mainly, from what we've heard, by connecting weavers to each other for peer learning and support, by offering training and skills, because a lot of people just start doing great things in their community, but without skills around facilitating groups, around community organizing, writing grants to get funds for projects in the community. So we provide a lot of support in terms of learning and training. And then we work to inspire more people to be weavers of their communities, and we lift up weavers as critical community leaders.
Mm, beautifully said. And I'm just thinking that it was just the right time for you because you've been doing it and doing it, trying to get there. And I think, there are parts of this, especially with where you worked, really, with NPR and public television. But you're talking about even taking it to another level where it's not just a story that people see and go, oh, that's so nice. There's good people out there, but for everybody to be part of the story. And so how do you, I think, and then how do you find these people? They're already out there, right? I mean, they're there and they're doing it and they can feel very lonely, right?
Exactly. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we find them, but again, if our theory of change is that if these people understand that what they're doing is actually healing a nation of divisions, they're just starting in their communities, and they have the resources and the profile that what they're doing really matters, that they will do greater work, inspire others to join them, and eventually we'll have a nation of weavers working from the community level on up and making us feel as Americans again that we actually count on each other, we can rely on each other, and we can work together even when we have different opinions on what's needed. So that's kind of our vision, a nation of weavers. In terms of finding people, the project initially started 5 years ago. It was founded by David Brooks, the columnist and author, because he had been writing about all these social problems and kept realizing that there was something beneath it, this lack of trust, this lack of connection. He called it a crisis of connection in this country. And so when the project began at the Aspen Institute, he and the team would go to different communities, and we'd set those visits up by calling leaders in the community and saying, who are the folks that are most trusted in your community? And they would give us names, and we would call them, and we'd ask them, who are the folks most trusted in your community? And after a few rounds of that, we got a list of about 20, 25 people that everyone said, oh yeah, these people are really trusted. They're amazing in our community. And then the team would go out there and would provide a lunch and would talk for a couple hours and say, tell us about your work, about the community, what the needs are, what the strengths are. And so we built our kind of philosophy of how we support weavers on those initial interviews. And now people find us in a million different ways, on the web, through social media, through talks that we give. We've got a speakers bureau where we actually put weavers on stages, sometimes for the first time in their lives, to describe their work in their communities, to inspire others. David Brooks still talks about that. He's got a new book that's out this month where called, I think it's called How to Know a Person. And it's all about what are the skills for weaving. And he talks in his interviews and book tour about the Weave Project and how important it is for people to see themselves as weavers. But we have a large support network, a set of projects and programs to support weavers and help them find each other, all available at weavers.org, which is our main website.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this part too, because I remember going to David Brooks's when he had a book a few years ago to hear him speak, and learning that. And I'm not sure if he said this then or I read about it afterward, but he said that he was starting to get really depressed in life. Right, he was suffering from depression because he felt like you were saying it didn't matter. Whatever he did didn't seem to change the world. And he also said that he was teaching a class at NYU. And he asked the students, well, what do you want to be in your life? And most of them wanted to be a rock star, a movie star, a sports star. That's really what they wanted. And they talked about the money. They wanted the money. And he just couldn't believe, that this was the mindset of so many young people at NYU, So he probably was feeling this long before, right? He actually came up with this idea.
Yeah. His last book was called Second Mountain, and that was really where he introduced, and in the book he talks about the Weave Project. And the idea of Second Mountain is that he had climbed the first mountain of success, and then kind of his life fell apart, his marriage fell apart. He was part of the conservative movement, and as he puts it, the conservative movement moved away from him, and he realized that he had weekend friends, but not weekday friends, not close friends. And he realized that he had spent his life kind of working in a very storytelling way. He said, I was living alone in an apartment, and I would work in my kitchen. In the drawer where I should have utensils, I had pens and paper, and all I did was work, and I really didn't have a life outside of that. And so through in writing that book, he explained his own transition to realizing that the treasure in life is relationships. It's not achievements. And he interviewed, as he does for every book, a lot of people, tells a lot of stories about weavers, and said, this is what I want to be. I want to climb that mountain, not the mountain of success that I thought would make me happy, but this second mountain that's actually higher and will be more fulfilling than everything else, than the rock star, the movie star, the sports star.
Yeah. I think a lot of people come to this later in life, sickness, maybe even losing the money that you thought was so, invaluable to have lots of money, having a career where you're respected. And then something happens as you get older. I'm not saying for everybody, but where you go, what's really important, right? Let me do some community service. Let me help others. Like people suddenly know that it doesn't bring happiness. I just wonder, so reaching the young people, and from what I saw with your videos, it's a lot of young people coming to these conversations, right? And being involved. It's not just conversations, but
it's not so much age. The studies do show that older people are more trusting, but that's hard to know if that's a remnant of the last 50 years and people grew up in an age that was more trusting and now there's less trust. It's not so much age, it's more that people tend to come to being weavers when there's a break in their lives of some sort. For many, it's trauma. For David, it was, the breakup of his marriage and all sorts of other issues, making him realize that his life wasn't what he had thought it was. For many young people, it's the transition out of, living at home and going to college or starting a career or moving to, a new place where you don't know people, that creates this break that kind of gives you some freedom to wonder about, what does it mean? What do I really want in my life? So I think a lot of the young people, we've been doing some work in colleges, and a lot of the young people are in this transitional phase, and they're very interested in these questions of, what is life about? And we know that Gen Z now in particular says the world, the older generations have left us a world that's not working. Job opportunities aren't as good. We're not going to do better than our parents. And so many of them are actually saying, I want to find my meaning elsewhere. I don't want to live by the standards of the boomer culture, where it was status, money, power. I want to live differently. And many, many of them are realizing that being embedded in community is what gives happiness. It's funny because there's a very old movie, I think in the 40s, called It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, yes, yes.
And It's a Wonderful Life is all about this guy, George Bailey, who wants to travel the world, and he wants to build skyscrapers, and he's in a little town called Bedford Falls. And every time he tries to escape, something happens in the town that calls him to stay to help his community. And then at the end of his life, he's going to commit suicide because he feels like, the thing he's been building, a small, kind of bank, community bank, has a crisis. It's going to fall apart. And he says, everything I've worked for is useless, never fulfilled my dreams. And the movie's all about how the community comes back to him in support to save the bank, and he realizes how much he's actually lived a full and rich and a wonderful life by serving community, and that the community is there for him. So it's not a new idea, but I think we've lost that sense that community service, being embedded in community, is every bit as rich, maybe even more fulfilling than going out and living in 5 countries and earning a lot of money and paying $100 for a sushi dinner, or any of the things that young people kind of think of as signs of success.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of thinking. It's a way of being. Do you feel though that hearing this at one moment, just learning this, what you're talking about, getting this message? I'm not saying it's enough to change a person, because like you say, you put these people through a process, and they learn more and they start to understand this more. But even just one moment of hearing this can shift you because you know that the other way isn't working. And I know that happened to me spiritually. And you and I practice the same meditation with the Brahma Kumaris. And I remember, being just caught up in my career, just who's the next star I get to interview or the next person, or, that was. And then I started to lose interest in that. And I realized actually the community was interviewing people just in the community, not famous people. And I got very excited about that. And I'm not excited, I got fulfilled. But then when I made my first trip to learn about meditation, because someone told me I needed to meditate because I seemed stressed, and he agreed, he did too. When that happened, and I was going to the center, the meditation center in Miami, the Brahma Kumaris Meditation Center, I had like almost a realization. It was a realization that it wasn't about my career. It wasn't even about my family, though these are important things. It was about being service, helping the world, bringing light to the world. And that moment changed me. That moment, it was just one moment, but it was leading up because I wasn't fulfilled with a lot of the past stuff. So I was just thinking that it's exposing to people to these ideas, right? That's not why we're here. We're not here to keep taking. We're here to give, right? Isn't that?
Our work is about helping people find a change of heart. And it's a little too simple to say, now I want to help people, because it's not really about charitable work.
No.
For many weavers, the word charity is kind of a dirty word,
Sure.
because it implies that I'm different than you. I'm privileged. I have things you don't. I have a duty to kind of help you. That's not how weavers show up. Weavers show up with this sense of mutuality, that everyone's got a soul that's equally valuable. There's dignity in every person. And they show up for others and do work building a stronger community because everyone has something to offer, and they love and find treasure in the relationships that are formed. So, I like to say everyone has something to offer. You can see someone who's unhoused on the street, maybe mentally ill, but think of the wealth of experience, lived experience they have that they can share in relationships, that they can share to kind of deepen our own experience of the world and what matters. Can deepen our own spiritual experience. Everyone has something to offer, and we see that. So one of the projects we have, we call it the Weaver Network, is we've worked with the Points of Light Foundation, which has a large database of volunteer opportunities, over 50,000 of them in the US. And we've created a filtering system to try to identify just the opportunities that aren't about, we need an accountant to help our nonprofit with its books. We need someone to, cook food for 3 hours in a soup kitchen, but to find opportunities that are weaving opportunities, that are about relationships. It might be in a soup kitchen, but it's an opportunity where you don't just spend some time cooking or cleaning up, but you actually sit down with people who come for meals and you share stories with them and you get to know them and you leave feeling more connected to your community. We're trying to shift the idea of volunteerism from being about manpower, donating hours, to being about building a community for all and doing it together with all. So we introduced the word weaving to describe this different way of showing up that isn't about helping in the traditional sense, though many projects do help the community. And the aim is to build a stronger community. But it's about showing up and realizing that everyone's got a role, everyone's interdependent and connected. And once we recognize that, trust builds, and we feel like we belong in the community, sometimes for the first time.
It's a whole different way of looking at life and looking at each other. And I can see just by you talking and even the expression on your face, the fulfillment that you're getting, and there's nothing like that when you're involved with things with people that care, and you can be part of something, and it's not you doing it, which probably you spent a lot of your career, you were the one doing it, whether you were reporting in, Rwanda or wherever, you were the reporter, you were doing that. But this is where it's, like you say, a connectedness of people coming together. And it's not about that this person did this or, this person did that. And
Let me
I
share,
think
Meredith, one story to make
yeah,
this idea of a
tell me.
weaver a little,
Yeah.
little more real. I'll talk about LB Privet. Laura Beth is her name. She goes by LB, and she grew up in a rural county in Appalachia in North Carolina. And she is gay. And when she was in her teens, she wasn't accepted. The message she got is, "You're not welcome here. You've got to leave." At one point, she got beaten up, and she just said, "That's it. I got to get out of here." She went to California, but she kept feeling that something was wrong, and she kept realizing that everyone in my community is different. Is kind of told to leave. Even the really good, exceptional people are told, "You got to get out of here. You got to find great opportunities." The big cities. And she realized that if everyone leaves her tiny county of Wilkes in North Carolina, who's different, then how will the people who actually stay there realize the importance of a diverse community and learn to create belonging for everyone? And she also felt like, well, what about the kids after me who are gay? I've left. They don't have anyone to help them, deal with all that comes in being in this small rural community. So she went back to Wilkes, and she's now become a hugely important person in the
Oh,
community. She's facilitates a lot of meetings. She just opened a bar on Main Street that is stunningly diverse for a tiny North Carolina rural community, and even has an extensive menu of mocktails so that people who don't drink feel comfortable in the bar. And it's always packed when I've been there and seen it. And she is constantly doing economic development projects, and she's known and trusted by many people, even conservative politicians in town and in the state, who come to talk to her about issues like a bathroom bill that would exclude people from choosing which gender bathrooms to use and all of that, because they trust her as a connector, and she listens. She doesn't shame and blame, because she's a weaver. She sees the dignity in all people. It's one example. I mean, our weavers are so different. Some live in the inner city of Baltimore. Some live in rural areas. There are people who have chosen to stay in tough neighborhoods in Chicago and build a neighborhood and buy vacant lots from the city and turn them into homework stations and art spaces and community gardens in order to enable a community to feel like they have value, and kids want to actually stay there and be there.
another beautiful story. And I, when I hear this, it's a weaver, but and maybe this is part of being a weaver. It's a change maker, isn't it,
Mm-hmm.
as well? We can talk about change and we can talk about equality, but you have to see it in action. You have to see people that are doing these kinds of things. So how do you spread this? I mean, it's a big country, right? I
We're
mean,
working on it, and I'm the
you know,
communications director for the project.
right?
A lot of that rests on me.
You got a lot to
Um,
do.
one way we're doing it is we have an online a Weave community, which now has about 1,200 people in it. And so folks who hear about our project and either are weavers or aspire to be weavers can join this community for peer learning and support. And they can find mentors and they can meet people. We have circle groups, small groups of like 7 or 8, using a platform that's a little, well, actually much friendlier than Zoom. Everyone appears in a circle, and if you're speaking,
Oh,
go to the center of the circle. And we have an introductory set of 4 circles where people meet other weavers when they join the community and talk about what weaving means in their lives and what it means to their community. But then we've got we've got a full learning center with all sorts of trainings in public speaking and grant writing and other things. I mentioned the Weaver Network, which is a search engine where you basically can put in your zip code and find organizations within 5 or 10 miles that are offering opportunities to do weaving work. So we do that. We work with media a fair bit. Media is tough because so much of media reporting is about conflict.
mm-hmm.
And the media views anything good happening in community, the strengths in a community that can be built on as human interest that gets maybe thrown in at the end of a program, or in the metro section of the paper or something. But we work the media to actually try to tell stories of weavers, to inspire others. We have a program called Weaver Awards, where we find foundations and corporations that are interested in being more intimate kind of members of a community, and they provide the funds, and we've got a model to run an award program that finds and gives money to people in neighborhoods who are doing work. You don't have to be a nonprofit to get a Weaver Award. You can be a group of neighbors. And the application process is maybe 20, 30 minutes online. You don't need to know how to do budgets. You don't have to do extensive reports. A member of our team calls up every few months to get an oral report on what's going on. How's your project going? Is there anything we can do to support you? It's just a different model of hyperlocal philanthropy that's all about supporting the neighbors in a neighborhood who are bringing people together. So these are some of the programs we do.
It's like supporting just regular people out there, right? Not the people that are heads of gigantic companies or movie stars like we were talking about. It's just real people, which is most of the world, right? Most of America. It's just people. I can see why you're so fulfilled. I really can. And so I guess, for you, it's just, would you say just to keep going? You have to just keep going until at some point, like the 100th monkey story, right? Where eventually, I don't know if everybody knows this, right? I think we, hear a lot, but eventually something changes.
And we reach a tipping point, and there's a lot of research that shows that a tipping point happens when 20-25% of a group or a country or a community begins to adopt something new. David Brooks, our founder, likes to say, change happens when people find a better way to live and other people see it and want to copy it. And so the tipping point is that as more and more people who are doing weaving things, you're more exposed, and at some point you say, I want to try that. And the more people out there, the more likely you are to be exposed and to want to do it. And this is a long game. We're not going to, Washington isn't going to legislate an answer to our broken social trust in this country. This is about people in communities showing up, seeing everyone across difference as having value, and doing the work that builds relationships and connection.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? In the end, at the end of one's life or any time in one's life, what gives us fulfillment? Connecting with people on a deeper level. Like you said, showing up when people need help. I find it's just a beautiful, I don't want to say project, it's an organization, right? That you're, helping to head. And I just see that, and we're involved with other things you're involved with, in a very big way. You're involved with the Peace Studio, which is doing something similar, is not different, but spreading the message of peace, and Images and Voices of Hope, which merged. You were involved with that. I remember when you first came to our first retreat in upstate New York at the Peace Village. I remember this very well. I don't know if you do.
I do.
You were sitting outside you didn't really know why you were there or anything, but you came. We had actually met you in Miami. It was Wendy Bodden that introduced me to you in Miami. You were there for a conference, and you came. You said, I don't know why I'm here. I have kids at home and I'm too busy. And then at the end, you were sitting in this kind of a hut that we had, like a kind of a chicky hut or something, tiki hut. And you said, I've changed. Something has happened to me. So you are really living proof, that because you were there and you didn't want to be there. And then you saw when people are trying to make a difference in the world, these are all people coming together to make a difference through the media and the arts. And you saw that, and then you became so involved, and you're such an important part of both organizations, such an integral part.
I'm much happier now. I started, when I made that change, I started really trying to bring it to the culture of journalism, and did that for many years, and finally realized that culture wasn't changing, that needed to more directly, work with people in communities. Because I had been working at the international level, the national level. I did some work at the community level, but journalists are a hard group to shift. So I am feeling very good now about the work we're doing. And it's hard and it's audacious. I mean, we're trying to change culture after all, and we're trying to get people to stop focusing so much on striving for themselves and stop seeing all of our relationships as transactions, but really seeing them as relationships, continuing relationships that are meaningful. Those are big, audacious goals, but to me, it's the only thing worth working on now, as so much in our world seems to be falling apart.
I mean, what else is there but to help people and to know that you're part of helping and giving, and and what happens to you physically? You feel better, when you're giving rather than taking, right? And when you're giving and you're helping, you're not fearful. You just know that everything will work out and you're not worrying about the future. I mean, everything shifts when you have this mindset. I guess your message, and I think the message of other groups for what you're doing is really, really special because your organization understands how this works. And think change happens. Change can happen, right? I always think, well, we went from the medieval ages to the Renaissance, right? We went from the darkness to light. And, I know that's maybe a little simple, but it happened.
And we can do this.
Yeah.
Americans can come together. We came together after World War II. You see it when, a hurricane hits or, there's a disaster. People come together. We just have to shift. I really saw the pandemic as a chance for a shift. But, what we saw is an initial outpouring of support for each other. But then all of a sudden we went right back to our divisions. Should we wear masks or not? And people kind of getting into this righteous mode of, we shouldn't wear masks, we should reopen everything quickly because businesses are failing. We got back into a conflict mode rather than into kind of the sense of we're in this together. But we can do it. And I'm convinced we can do it. It requires us to think differently, and it requires us to go against a lot of the norms that say, be out for yourself. Don't trust people. People will take advantage of you. Worry about your family first. Doesn't matter where you live. Follow your job. I mean, all these norms that have basically told us for a long time that this is just about you and not about us.
I also had read, and I think we are out of time here. I could go on all day with you, but Karen, that's how you change. What changed you? Because you realized it wasn't so much about transforming the world, but just caring, about people. And I thought that was so beautiful when I read that. Compassion, feeling for others. That's how you connect, right?
Change starts
How
with
we
us.
connect. Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for joining me
My
and for being
pleasure.
on this program. Most inspiring, you really are. And as I said earlier, you've been through a lot in terms of accomplishing a lot and working on so many projects in the media. And it's just a beautiful thing to see that this is where you're at today and that there's such a good feeling and you're so hopeful. So we can't give up. None of us, right? We have to keep going. So
always wonderful
and doing
speaking with you.
good things. Great
Thank
to
you
be
so
with you.
much for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.